Good afternoon, everyone, and thanks for joining today. My name is Lindsay Carroll, and I'm the Marine Education Coordinator with Oregon Sea Grant. I coordinate programming for all ages out of Oregon State University's Hatfield Marine Science Center located in Newport, Oregon. My goal today is to provide you insight into how we converted our traditional in-person programming that we typically host out of the Science Center to a virtual format as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. So I plan to share the structure, our planning considerations, the barriers we came across, some curriculum examples and materials used, our lessons learned, and overall impact. So for more than 40 years, Oregon Sea Grant's Marine Education Program has provided engaging, hands-on, formal and informal learning opportunities that promote ocean literacy and the development of scientific practices, critical thinking, and other lifelong learning skills. At Hatfield, we utilize our visitor center, which is pictured on the two left photos, and our wet labs, which is pictured in the lower right, to engage participants in a variety of activities that are not readily available in classrooms. So we offer careers in science investigation programs, homeschool programming, summer day camps, hands-on lab and field experiences for school groups and organizations, and then specialty programming throughout the year to get students and families connected with marine science. And so as you can see, we offer a variety of in-person programs throughout the year to connect students and families to marine science. But so as of February 2020, we were gearing up for a busy season where we would host thousands of K through 12 students via our school field trips. We'd be hosting nearly 100 homeschool students via our spring homeschool day event, and anywhere from 50 to 90 students for our career day events. And registration was also in full swing for our summer day camps, where we typically host 80 students in person through our 4 age-specific camps. However, I'm sure you can all relate that this schedule quickly ended up looking like this. And so effective for us on March 16th, the Hatfield Marine Science Center closed and all on-site in-person programming was canceled until further notice. And so this meant that our spring school field trips and our homeschool day events were canceled. And so we did quickly convert our in-person careers in science investigations event to a webinar format and our in-person summer day camps to a virtual hybrid format. And I look forward to sharing about that today, because we definitely did not want to completely cancel some of our biggest outlets to promote ocean literacy and reach marine science enthusiasts. It's important to note that our first big step was identifying our strengths and what sets us apart from other organizations and programs, so that we could find our niche as we were all trying to go virtual last minute. One of the biggest strengths of our education program is being located at the Hatfield Marine Science Center. Hatfield serves as Oregon State University's coastal campus and as an oceanographic research base for 6 state and federal agencies, including Oregon Sea Grant, NOAA, the U.S. Department of Agriculture, EPA, Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. So this meant we have access to many and a variety of STEM researchers and professionals. And so while it was foreign to us then, we also recognized that OSU has a Zoom web conferencing license where we could offer virtual learning options. We also have accumulated over the years ample curriculum and hands-on activities that could be converted to an online format. Lastly, we also have a great team of educators that are tech savvy and always up for the challenge of adapting educational content to a variety of formats. And so this left us with a few questions to consider. How can we continue to serve students and promote ocean stewardship? And how can we bring experiential learning opportunities to students' homes? So given the access to these STEM researchers and professionals on our Hatfield campus and the access to a Zoom webinar license, the event that we thought was the easiest to convert to an online format in a very short amount of time last spring was our careers in science investigations. And so I plan to share with you the structure, the format, the planning considerations, some lessons learned, and overall impact. For our Careers in Science Investigations webinar series, I'm going to call it CSI for short. It's a bit of a mouthful. We use the Zoom platform to host a series of 45-minute webinars. During each webinar, we featured 2 STEM professionals, giving each presenter 15 minutes to present, and then I moderated about 5 to 10 minutes worth of questions, which the participants provided. While our in-person career day event typically is geared towards high school students, we decided, because of the virtual platform, to open up our audience to include middle school students, so we reached 6th through 12th graders. Webinars were scheduled on Wednesdays at 4 p.m. Pacific time so that sessions did not compete with the during school hour virtual obligations and did not interrupt family evening schedules. While the webinars began at 4, we asked our presenters and our speakers to join us for a troubleshooting session 30 minutes prior to the webinar start. And to make these events as accessible as possible, the series was free to everyone and anyone who was able to pre-register ahead of time. The planning process for this event required speaker recruitment via email. I used a lot of my networking and social capital to connect with folks around Hatfield and beyond, even on OSU's campus. And we also obtained a Zoom shared webinar license through OSU. Once we had access to the webinar license, we generated webinar registrations for all of our events, and we marketed our events via our existing email distribution lists and Facebook, and of course, encouraged everyone to share about as they could. We also we were also in close contact with the OSU Youth Safety and Compliance Director to ensure that we were complying with all youth safety standards in our new virtual world. The reason we selected the Zoom webinar format versus the Zoom meeting format was because the webinar platform prohibits participants' video and audio. It requires pre-registration using an authentic email address, and the question and answer function enables students to ask questions directly to the webinar hosts, so the panelists, so it was myself, my coworker, and our speakers. That way the students' names couldn't be seen by anyone other than event hosts. Some of the lessons learned, I will echo what a lot of our conference speakers have already said. It's best to have at least 2 staff members present for online events. I served as the CSI webinar host and moderator, and then my coworker served as my tech behind the scenes support. Be sure to record your virtual events as long as you have the consent that's required, as they become valuable. These are invaluable resources that we now have on our website. Hatfield is a common contact point for students that are interested in careers in marine scientists or careers in marine science. And so now I have hours of content to direct them to from these pre-recordings. Be sure to troubleshoot with your presenters ahead of time, whether it's immediately before your session or days before your session. It's a great time to orient your speakers to the flow of the event, test screen sharing, test the video, the audio, test any videos that they may be showing throughout their presentation, and just get on the same page. It's also a good practice to request your speakers' presentations and their contact information ahead of time. That way, if there's a screen share glitch, you have their presentation on hand. And then, of course, having their phone number just in case there's any glitches during the session or any issues that you may need to get in contact with them. While closed captioning is a requirement for ADA accessibility, we found it also helped the closed captions also helped make sense of what speakers were saying in case like a glitch occurred while someone was speaking due to maybe limited bandwidth. It also helped make sense of or helped spell out complex terminology that sometimes scientists use. But one thing to keep in mind is that though the post-processing time of closed captioning. While we attempted to keep this in-house, we quickly learned that closed captioning, a 45-minute webinar, took hours, even though you're just editing the text that it automatically puts out. So we worked with our communications folks with Oregon Sea Grant, and they agreed to pay for the fees to get our webinars closed captioned, and they also posted our webinar recordings to our Oregon Sea Grant YouTube channel. So if you plan to record and close caption your videos, be sure to work with either your communications folks or whether it's the extension communications folks or folks within your immediate program to see who you can work with and who can support you in the effort. While we thought that exceeding a 45-minute webinar, or while an event that exceeds 45 minutes virtually, we thought we might lose attention spans, we found that students were very engaged, and our timing often went beyond 45 minutes. So you could easily advertise and do a 45 or an hour webinar, which is what we now do for the series that we've been doing this past fall. And to ensure that we're meeting the students' needs and their interests, we developed a post-webinar survey that asked participants to rate the webinar, the speakers, the accessibility of Zoom, ease of understanding the speakers. And we also asked them to provide comments and ideas that would help us plan future events. Finally, I want to take a quick moment and discuss the overall impact of our webinar series as a background for one in-person 6-hour career event that we typically hold 2 times a year. We normally recruit a handful of presenters. We host groups as small as 25 students to as many as 90 students at once. And so through our webinar series from mid-April through mid-June, we hosted 9 webinars. And then of course, and due to the program's success, we brought it back for this past fall and have hosted 7 of 8 webinars since mid-October. And so through this spring and fall series, we've collaborated with 33 STEM professionals who provided insights into a variety of careers. The topics are listed here. We reached over 525 registered participants of all ages. There's nothing keeping anyone from all ages to join, though mainly middle school through high school. And folks were actually joining us from across the United States. We had like nearly a handful of international viewers. And now we have approximately 15 hours of career-connected education content that is accessible on our website. So this is invaluable. And of course, it's really cool to see how much we really expanded our reach. So next, I'm going to share the structure and format and the planning considerations and some activity examples, some lessons learned, and the overall impact of going virtual with our summer day camps. And so in June 2020, we were advised to cancel our in-person camps, but instead of canceling the summer programs completely, our team solicited feedback via a survey to the parents and guardians that had already registered their campers. And so we asked the parents through this online survey had the opportunity to rank the options outlined and provided feedback on timing and other logistics. And while a lot of parents opted to cancel because their child was just exhausted at that time of online programming, we definitely did receive enough interest to move forward with the virtual hybrid alternatives to the point where we created a virtual, so we created these alternatives and moved forward with the planning process. So for the virtual portion, camp participants interacted online with each other, with researchers and educators for 2 hours for 3 days of the regularly scheduled Monday through Wednesday portion of the camp. They engaged in marine science activities and ocean art activities virtually. We invited guest speakers, these STEM professionals that we have at Hatfield, to serve as the hook to introduce marine science and engineering topics. And then our educators led hands-on activities that allowed students to dive deeper into that topic. And so we designed activities that would be completed both during camp hours and then also set up activities that the campers could do on their own time, because our traditional in-person camps are 6 hours a day for 4 days. We didn't want to do all of that virtual. So we tried to give them as many opportunities as possible to kind of meet the number of hours we would typically reach them. All materials needed for these hands-on activities were sent to participants via Camp in a Box. At the start of each virtual session, students were provided the time to debrief on their previous day's activities. So this promoted further connection and between campers and educators, and also allowed campers to expand on what they learned. Campers also had the option to join education staff for a physically distanced 2-hour outdoor activity at the coast on the last day of camp, or the 4th day of camp, which is the Thursday. These programs simulated the field trip to a coastal habitat that campers would typically take during a traditional in-person camp. We offered one camp per age group, grouping students into our traditional structure, which is students 15 to 18. Another camp was for 13 to 14-year-olds, 11 to 12, and 8 to 10. One camp per age group. We maintained our 2 educator minimum, not only for youth safety, but also for tech support and student management. And the cost of the virtual only, which was the Monday through Wednesday option, was $60. And then for an additional $15, for a total of $75, the students could add on this optional activity at the coast as part of the hybrid option. Our marine education team brainstormed speakers and existing activities that were relevant so that we could pair a speaker with a hands-on component that could easily be converted to a virtual format. We outlined instructions in detail so that campers could be as successful as possible, because we can't move around the room like we typically would at summer camp. So we try to give them as much information as possible so that they can do these activities on their own. We utilized a Google Drive to share all worksheets, instructions, supplemental materials, anything that the campers needed to be successful. We also printed copies of all instructions and worksheets, especially for younger campers. The older campers were able to navigate Google Drive, but if you want to make sure they have it in front of them, you want to make sure you print it for them. Um, Given that we were using the Zoom meeting function this time, we definitely had to employ some extra safety measures to make sure we were complying with the OSU youth safety standards. We only shared the Zoom meeting link with the parents via an email ahead of time, and also we provided a camp orientation document, an overview of all the activities and materials needed. We printed that out and provided that in their Camp in a Box. We used the waiting room function and asked all participants um, to change their names to reflect the name that we would see on our participant roster. So whether it was their name or their parent's name, we definitely wanted to check the names against the roster before admission. We also had the 2 educators present, so with the student at all times. And then we also ensured that we were complying with the OSU specific protocols related to COVID-19, so we had to complete a communicable disease plan to ensure safety of all participants that were attending the in-person activity. And so I also want to take a quick moment to share some quick fun activities that we were able to do online. And so due to the funding support of Oregon State University's Regional Class Research Vessel NSF funded project, RCRV for short, we were able to purchase supplies necessary for students to build their own hydraulic arm. And so some of you may be familiar with the Mission Submersible SMILE curriculum. I've got the link here. I adapted this curriculum for our purposes, and so the link's listed, but I'll also provide these links along with some others at the end of my presentation. For this activity, we literally hooked the campers by featuring staff from the RCRV project. The presentations provided a behind the scenes scoop of the engineering process of 3 state-of-the-art research vessels. We also had other guest speakers provide insights into how they use hydraulic arms to help them launch and recover equipment that are critical to their research, like remotely operated vehicles, autonomous underwater vehicles, and more. And then so equipped with their knowledge, the campers the educators worked with the campers to introduce the build a hydraulic arm activity. And so the objectives of the activity were to build a model of a launch and recovery system, a hydraulic arm is an example of one of them, that could move science packages or items found at home of various sizes on and off a research vessel. And so the materials listed here were supplied via a kit and mailed to the campers as part of their Camp in a Box. So it was definitely a camp favorite. We featured it multiple times. If you have questions about this activity and how to maybe make it age appropriate for different age groups, feel free to contact me. Another one of our activities we actually took one of our in-person lab experiences called Speedy Science, or crab races, and converted it to an online format. Students engaged in the process of science as they determined different variables that contribute to shore crab speed. And so I collaborated with a colleague at Hatfield to pre-record shore crabs racing. These are shore crabs from our labs. I played the videos during the virtual time, and students were able to make observations, form their hypothesis, use timers to as they viewed the shore crabs racing, draw conclusions. And so we set the videos to a fun racing music like Mario Kart, other horse racing type music, and made it extra fun. So the kids really appreciated it. Campers also engaged in the process of science via our float a boat activity, which helped where they determined if boat shape or otherwise surface area impacted the number of pennies a boat can hold. So pennies were the cargo in this case. We also brought the beach to our campers' homes by providing them a beach in a box. We filled a small Tupperware container with sand and assorted beach and beach and tide pool biofacts, and then we sent them an iLoop. You can see one of our campers pictured here using it at home. Sent them an iLoop and had them investigate their biofacts and write a haiku to share the next day. We also conducted live animal interactions using the assorted invertebrates that we have in our labs and discussed the adaptations that enable them to live in their environment. This was a great way to see which of our in-person lab and field experiences could be adapted to an online format. And so in addition to those virtual sessions, our campers also had the option to register for a 2-hour activity at the coast. And so for these events, we required all campers to be accompanied by an adult for the entire program so that their parents and families could serve as their learning partners, because we had to distance and we couldn't interact with them. And that way their parents and guardians could also be there to address any behavioral or mask issues. When the tide was low, we hosted campers at a tide bowl local to Newport, Seal Rock. Some of you may be familiar with it. We used the 2 hours to get a closer look at some of our favorite tide pool critters, Campers and their families searched for sea stars, sea anemones, sea urchins, mussels, and barnacles. And extra bonus points were always given to anyone who found a nudibranch, which is one of my favorite tide pool treasures. That's pictured here in the lower center photo. We definitely found them both times we went there, I will say. When the tide was not low enough for tide pooling, we hosted campers and their families for activities at a beach local to Newport. Students were challenged to scan the rack line and see if they could find some of those biofacts similar to the beach in the box that we sent them. They learned about currents by throwing oranges in the ocean and measured how far they traveled. And then families were also challenged to find and collect data on mole crabs so that they could get an idea of the day in the life of a field scientist. And of course, when you're at the beach, there's always ways to get creative. And so I'll direct your attention to the lower right-hand photo where you'll see campers and their families found a piece of kelp that could quickly be converted into a jump rope. And so that was a lot of fun. Some lessons learned, group size matters. It's easy to assume that the virtual world can allow more people, but we found more than 20 video tiles on your screen at one time can be hard to manage. And it's also hard to maintain that connection, the interaction component that's so critical, especially in a day camp scenario. Our use of Google Drive to share all camp instructions, worksheets, supplemental materials worked really well, especially for the older students that can navigate it. 1 week of priority mail shipment turned out to not be long enough. So make sure you allow plenty of shipment time if you decide to accompany a box with any of your virtual programs. Our evaluations confirmed that 2 hours of virtual time was plenty sufficient. That way folks don't get too tired, but then you leave them wanting to learn more. Everything definitely takes longer than you think. As educators, we always try to estimate the amount of time something will take, but just rule of thumb, it seems simple, but everything takes longer than you think, so don't overplan. And for our activity at the coast, we only required one adult or guardian to accompany the camper, so we didn't require any extra registration for this, but families definitely took the opportunity to make it a family event. So we had grandparents and siblings joining as well, which is great. We definitely would love to expand how many folks we're reaching, but it's also for planning purposes and especially COVID-19 group size guidelines. You want to make sure that you have folks register the total number so that way you know how many people to expect. Some must-dos, definitely to staff members, I can't say that enough, for the student management and the youth safety compliance components. We started out by only opening our Zoom link the 30 minutes ahead of time on the first day of camp, but some of our evaluations said that there was a missing link of student bonding. So after our first camp, we decided to open our Zoom link 30 minutes ahead of time for the remaining camps. That allowed students to come on and connect and chit chat and provide that like camp setting that the bonding that you find at camp setting. And so that was critical. And so we also make sure you set clear expectations for both campers and their parents. We did this via email correspondence using our orientation documents and also included some remarks at the beginning of camp. Make sure you print all instructions and worksheets, especially if you want to make sure that they have it in front of them the time that you're asking them to grab it. Use an autofocus HD camera for any live animal interactions you're doing during a virtual program. My wet hands couldn't quite manually adjust our focus. So things to consider. Games and icebreakers are also critical just to help maintain that camp feel during the virtual sessions that can often be lost. And post-camp evaluations were critical to learning what works, what doesn't work, what can be improved. Our overall impact, we hosted 4 camps from mid-July through mid-August. We featured 13 STEM professionals. Our virtual camp reached nearly 70 campers, and we were able to host students from Virginia, Illinois, Arizona, and more. The activity at the coast reached 43 campers and their families. And via the virtual hybrid option, we're available to provide approximately 32 plus hours of interactive educational content. The plus is because we were not able to quantify how much time folks spent engaging in activities after we met with them virtually. And so as a gauge, during a typical summer, our 4 camps cap at 80 students due to transportation limitations, but they typically yield about 96 hours of hands-on marine science theme educational content. So that's just a gauge. So as we navigated these new virtual formats, we definitely came across a few barriers. Some federal and state agency partners are not able to use Zoom. So it's definitely something to keep in mind as you navigate planning and having guest speakers. Everyone has varied internet access in terms of bandwidth and also even limited access to internet. So going virtually, unfortunately, does exclude those that do not have access to internet. Student screen fatigue may have also led to less registrants just because folks, just did not want to tune into yet another virtual event. Some additional barriers specifically associated with our webinar series are that the shared OSU webinar license limited the number of participants to 100 people. That is the number of users present online during your virtual program. So any number of folks can register, but only 100 can be on at once. And so the 1 week access of the shared webinar license quickly turned into 24 hours before and after, just because of the high demand of across the university as we were all transitioning last spring to a virtual format. And so this definitely led us to buying our own Zoom webinar license so that we can manage everything ourselves. So something to consider and budget for. Some additional barriers specifically associated with the virtual hybrid camps is one of our biggest barriers was funding. And making sure that we could cover the fees to have our educators, but then also make the fees low enough so that they were more manageable for our participants. And so seeking out that funding support from the Regional Class Research Vessel program or the project was definitely critical in helping cover shipping costs. So reach out to collaborators. And next, as a result of the pandemic, the Hatfield Marine Science Center was closed and only essential personnel were allowed on property. So this limited the total number of staff that could be on site, which left a smaller portion of our team the sole responsibility for prepping the camp and the boxes for shipment. So definitely something to consider if you are planning to do that with yourselves. And so this is close to one of my last slides. Thanks for bearing with me. In summary, the biggest takeaways, lessons learned from converting our content to a virtual world is ensure you're addressing the youth safety concerns. Eric Cardella is the Director of Youth Safety and Compliance here at OSU. He's a great resource. Feel free to throw any questions his way. His website's also extremely useful. I'll provide that link at the end of this presentation. Conduct a needs assessment. If you're considering moving your content to a virtual format, it's best to adapt your program to meet your audience's needs and goals. So we did this using our surveys. It is critical to assess your program's strengths and finding your niche so that you can set yourself apart from everyone else who's trying to also navigate the virtual world. Definitely don't reinvent the wheel. Prioritize adapting existing curriculum or activities that you have, and then seek collaborations and partnerships, not only to help with funding, but also, as we're all doing right now, learning from each other, figuring out what works, what doesn't work from others who have done it before. Be sure to invest in the technology. Make sure you have a solid product, whether you're making videos to share during your session or pre-recorded videos, I should say, or if you're doing things live from the field, make sure you have good equipment. These videos will serve as a great resource long after COVID. And so I attended a do-it-yourself video production session this morning. And so hopefully some of you were there. It was full of tips and tricks. So if you missed it, be sure you access the recording on the conference website in terms of what is the go-to technologies. Definitely get creative. The sky is the limit. And of course, be sure you embrace those technical snafus because they are absolutely certain they're going to happen. And so I know I jammed a lot of content in there for you guys, but thank you for joining today. Here's a link to our marine education, or I'll provide these links to our programming, and then I'm happy to use the rest of the time to answer any questions. And so I think I've seen Tracy here answering some questions, so thank you. Let's see what we got. Looks like, so what, Tracy, which ones have you not answered yet?
So they wanted to get a copy of your slides.
Yes, I will definitely provide a copy of slides.
And I already sent them the information for the website. There was a question about the webinar licenses, the OSU webinar license. Perhaps you can touch on how you request that.
Yeah, so it's on the OSU's website. So if you go to zoom.oregonstate.edu, you'll see this spot on there for webinar licenses. And so you have to request it ahead of time. And so that was one of our limitations, is because it's a shared license, there's only so many events that can be occurring at one time. So it's definitely something you can learn more on the OSU webinar website. Definitely a great resource. And I can pop that in here if I have a chance. I also recognize it's 1:30 and I want to be respectful of the folks that are coming in next. And so if you do, I will say on the webinar license, if you do plan to do a lot of these, it may be worth it to look into purchasing your own, just so that you can manage it yourself. And like I said, we were only able to do things once we had access to the license, which was, it turned into about 24 hours before and 24 hours after. So we've now purchased our own just because we know we are planning to use it and we had the funds for it. And then one more quick question. You have students from around the nation. How did you promote and get youth outside of Oregon? Honestly, I just used my existing contacts, and then I think the word just spread. So we have a social media account. We use Facebook. We have a listserv where and if you have participated in our programs, lucky you get added to our listserv and you get to learn more about our programs as we use that to advertise our programs. And so, I think it was just sharing through Facebook, and then folks that said, hey, I have a nephew or a niece who's passionate about marine science who lives in Arizona, and they would share it with them. So I think having the base that normally comes to us, and they helped us spread the word. Let's see, how much was the Zoom license? That's a great question. I can't recall that. I don't know if Kate Goodwin, our guru, might be on this call, but if she can type the answer to the chat. I can't remember the cost. Tracy, do you remember the cost?
I want to say it was $1,500, but we opted to go for the larger license, which is up to 500 people.
Right.
And that's for a year.
And I think it might be close to 250, 300 for the 100 folk. And then I will say, if you decide to get a license, say like a couple months into the year, they will prorate it cheaper. Isn't that correct, Tracy?
Yes.
Yeah. And I want to respect, I know folks are, well, it's only 1:32. We'll see if they kick us out. So I guess, let's see, another quick question. I will say, if you do have questions, I pasted my email in the chat here. And so if you have any questions, anything comes up, go ahead and email me. This recording will be available on the conference website. I also gave this similar presentation, but with more detail, for about 40 minutes for a separate event that's also recorded. So if you want access to that, feel free to email me. Let's see.
And I think the other question was, how many camper families were you able to host on the field trips?
On the field trips, let's see, let me go back to my slide and refresh my memory of numbers. We had 52, so 38 families total, 52 adults, 54 children. And so of those, that was 43 of those campers and their families. And so when I say and their families, that meant there were a total of 52 adults and 54 children, including them. So they brought their siblings, they brought their grandparents. It was great. We just needed to know that more ahead of time.
So I think the question there was probably the maximum number. And I want to say, didn't we have 40 some odd people for one of the particular field trips?
Oh, yes.
4 camps,
so,
right?
At that time, it's really important to note what your group size is per county. So at that time, we host these, we had to follow the Lincoln County guidelines. So we were not allowed to exceed 25 groups of 25. So in that case, we had our educators split up and position themselves separately down the beach. So we were still in eyesight of each other, but we definitely had close to like 40 at once, I want to say. But because that happened, we had to split our educators up.
And then there's a question about what we charged for camps.
So for the virtual hybrid option, so just virtual alone, 3 days, 2 hours per day was $60, and then $75 for the 4 days where it was 3 days virtual and 1 day hybrid, or I'm sorry, in person. But I will say we traditionally charge for our in-person camps, which is 6 hours for 4 days. We traditionally charge $185, but those prices might be changing once we're able to do that again.
And the price for the virtual and hybrid camps included all of the materials for the Camp in the Box, as well as the postage to get them those through the mail.
Right. Thank you, Tracy. But that's where the funding from the Regional Class Research Vessel was critical, because we were trying to keep the prices manageable, but also, having that partnership offset our shipping costs was huge. Because I will say we used a priority mail box that was $15 per box. But for the sake of timing, I do want to respect that you all need breaks and bio breaks and whatnot. So thank you so much for joining. If you have any extra questions, please do feel free to email me. And so good luck as you navigate this new virtual world. We can do this if we can do it together. So thank you, everyone.